as an interviewer, I'm looking at things from a different perspective. And that's the perspective I'm going to be giving you from the hiring, procurement, manager, director, etc. Hello, YouTube. Welcome to your procurement guide. I thought I would start with those who are interested in getting into the field of public sector procurement, and then we'll get into some of the things that might be relevant for more experienced people and or vendors in future episodes. But I thought I would start off with interview process for procurement coordinators, specialists, senior specialists, as those were the areas that myself and a number of different public sector entities were having problems trying to find qualified candidates or people who actually understood what they were applying for. So some of the questions I'll put up on the screen, because there are fairly common questions, and some of the questions are from HR about the organization. And most interviews in the public sector are panel interviews. You will have probably 3 people in an interview. I've earlier in my career had as many as 5 on an interview panel. And it's just to ensure fairness, transparency in the process, differing opinions. As an interviewee, I have found it difficult because you want to connect with the people you're talking to, and they all have various personalities. So sometimes it's a little bit difficult to make that connection, but try how you can. As an interviewer, I'm looking at things from a different perspective. And that's the perspective I'm going to be giving you from the hiring, procurement, manager, director, etc. So generally there's a phone screen that's done by the HR just to vet people coming in are actually interested in the position, because I can tell you there are people applying that I think they're just applying on keyword searches, because I've had investment bankers apply and realtors apply with no explanation in their cover letters or resume as to how their past experience had transferable skills into the procurement positions. So I think it was an accident that they applied. I'm not sure. But anyways, it's something to consider if you're using keyword searches and automated applications. You might want to vet your keywords and automated applications, because some of those ones coming in that don't explain the transition and transferable skills generally get weeded out right off the bat. I know in some organizations they may use keyword searches, so you might want to make sure that your resume does have the keywords that match up to the job description, but that's only getting you in the door. You got to be able to speak to it. So let's get into the interview questions and some of the homework you should do ahead of time. The first question is always about why. So tell us your interest in working in this team. What about it, this role inspired you to apply? Or why have you chosen to apply to our organization? When you're asked the question about the organization, generally that is an HR question for cultural fit. I look at it from the procurement standpoint that you actually did some research into the organization. And when people ask the question about, how do our vision, mission, and values speak to you, it's not a test to see if you memorize them. It's actually about whether or not it speaks to you, and it's something that you would fit with those values and mission, and you want to contribute to it. So for any of you that get that question about the vision, mission, values, don't memorize those and recite them back. Speak to how those fit with your values and how you think you can contribute to the mission and vision. From a procurement standpoint as well, if you're talking about why you applied for the role, make sure you understand the role. So from a public procurement perspective, most of the procurements are posted publicly due to trade agreements. So take a look at the types of things people posted for the organization and look at what typically they're buying. I can tell you, I've seen people apply and talk about their experience of reducing costs on goods or reducing inventory turns for an organization that primarily buys services. So you need to match your experience and skills to what they're buying and showing that you understand what the organization is buying, as opposed to you just applied because of the title. Homework is to see how the organization's mission, vision, values mesh with your own, and for the role, what are the types of things they buy to be able to speak to how your experience or your interests lie in buying those types of things. So that's the first 1, 2. Sometimes those are the same questions, sometimes split up. Then you go into your experience, walking through your experience, why you think you're a good fit. And that's where you want to make that connection between your past experience and some of the things you've learned about the organization. So try to make that connection. It's very similar to when we do requests for proposals and we're asking for vendors' experience. We want them to speak to the experience related to what we're buying. So same thing with this. The next question usually tends to be specific to the procurements. And a lot of times in public sector, they want to know your experience in drafting requests for proposals. So have you done one from building the request for proposals document, the evaluation booklet, and in later videos, we'll get into some tips and tricks on how to do those. So even if you're inexperienced, speak to what you do understand or what you've observed by working with other people and how you want to learn more. Or even if you've taken courses but haven't had the practical experience, speak to that experience. And then there are other scenarios, depending on the organization, about time management. Especially during the pandemic, a number of public sector organizations were overwhelmed and had to work very quickly to ramp up to demand for personal protection equipment, and various things for building out barriers for customer-facing locations. And it was things that had to be done really, really, really quickly. And still do, like, what else were you working on? So what you want to speak to is your time management and organizational skills. Even if it weren't for that type of situation or workload, they want to know how you prioritize things. And I can speak to, like, a couple of decades ago where we were trying to determine how someone would prioritize workload that was coming in, various projects, various dollar values, various complexities, and staff meetings. So I had created a scenario outlining, you have a staff meeting today, and these are the things on your plate, and this is an email that you've just received. How do you prioritize your day? And there's no right or wrong answers. It's just about justifying how you would prioritize things. And it was taken from a real life example that I had a number of RFPs out on the street. I had an emergency call from one of my end users that was having a contract management issue. And we had a staff meeting, a weekly staff meeting happening. And so it was interesting to see how different people in the interview prioritize different things. But what I did in real life is I spoke to my supervisor saying, this is what's happening. I think I need to miss the staff meeting. And I justified why, and they were okay with it. Whereas 8 out of 10 interviewees went to the staff meeting because they didn't want to tell their boss about, like, cancel going to a staff meeting. Again, it's no answers. It depends on your manager and your situation. That, maybe it's really important you have to go to the staff meeting. But it was based on a scenario. You had to mention your assumptions and mention how you would prioritize things. No right or wrong answers. It was just more about understanding your approach and how you would balance the workload and priorities. A lot of times, speaking to scenarios, a lot of times they will send the scenarios to you in advance, usually the night before, so that you have a chance to process it. Part of it is we want to know how you think on the fly, like how quickly can you make a decision in a situation. But, a lot of times they'll send those scenarios in advance so you can actually prepare for it. I've been to interviews where when I arrived for the interview, they gave me the scenarios and 30 minutes to prepare before the interview started. So those things occur as well. A little bit of advice is take a deep breath. If your mind goes blank, the panel understands. It's nerve-wracking to be in these situations. It's like a test in front of a bunch of people. Take a deep breath. Grab your water. Take a sip of water and then proceed. And again, I wouldn't worry about right or wrong answers. There's a lot of times that they'll ask you, what are your strengths? What's an area for improvement? And these are about self-awareness. How aware are you of your skills and developing your skills? So it's not about, oh, I'm perfect, or, I know I have some areas to improve upon. And it's more about self-awareness and what work are you putting into maintaining your strengths, leveraging your strengths, and improving the areas that you need to improve. So that's it. It's not a question to like, oh, what do I talk about my weaknesses? I wouldn't worry about that. I would worry about how self-aware can you be and what are you doing about working on development. Key challenges, past experiences. There are various competency and behaviors that various organizations are looking for. I can't speak to them all. I haven't been working with them all. But you can usually find in public service agencies a list of competencies and behaviors that they are seeking for the public sector entity. And those are the things that you can kind of look for. Some job descriptions will mention them at the bottom of their job descriptions. And if you find them there, you can do a Google search of the public sector entity to find out what are the definitions. Because someone's definition for innovation may differ from what private sector or you may think innovation is. So I would do a little bit of research, and hopefully that's helpful. Over the coming weeks, I will speak to you more about some of the specifics of the experience, public sector versus private sector, that you would want to highlight or gain some better understanding about. Thanks for watching. Please hit subscribe, hit like if this was helpful, and don't forget to sign up for our newsletter. Thanks.